Hey guys, today we're going to be working on a Craftsman YT3500. It has a hard start problem. Sometimes it starts, sometimes it doesn't. Let's go and lift this hood here. Basically the problem that the guy said was that sometimes it starts and sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't start, he comes over and he just removes the fuel line here, puts it back on, and he said it fires right up, but he said after a while sometimes that doesn't work and he's got to let it sit for a couple hours. So basically what I've diagnosed is that the diaphragm and the fuel pump, they start to go, and you know, there's a little spring in there, and they wear out and they're just not as strong as they were when they come from the factory. So what happens is that little fuel pump here doesn't pump the fuel. As you can see, this is not a gravity fed machine. It goes from the gas tank through the frame up and then up again, so it needs a fuel pump to put it into the carburetor. So they sell for like 20 bucks on Amazon, but we'd have to wait like, I don't know, half a month, maybe a month, but the guy wants to do one more cut before winter. So we had to go and buy one from the local parts store. It comes with a line and some fuel line clamps, you can see there, and this was like 43 bucks plus tax on top of that. So we called the customer and asked him if he wanted the, you know, the cheap aftermarket or the OEM, and he said go with the OEM. So basically, to get this off, it's just let me see if I can get a shot there. It's just a couple bolts, and we'll go ahead and take that off and make sure that we drain all the fuel so that we don't get fuel spraying out of there, and we'll see if we can get this thing fired up. I'm also going to take off the shroud because there's a little bit of, you can see there's a little bit of like dusty fellows, and I just want to make sure that that's not a mouse nest under there, but I believe it's just some dried grass. So let me go ahead and start taking this off, and I'll bring you back once I know more. Oh, and another thing is, one of the reasons I know that it, or I believe it's the fuel pump, is that when I take off the air filter cover here, an easy way to check to see if it is your fuel filter, or sorry, your fuel pump, is to pull this off, lift that off. Now this is just like spring in there. You just pop that off like that. An easy way to check is that while you're turning your engine over, if it doesn't start, go ahead and put your hand over here, not over it completely, just about halfway, and that simulates the choke. But what it does is you're getting less air and you're getting more fuel because you're creating suction. And if it fires up when you do that, then it creates more suction through the line, and you know, that lets you know that it is your fuel pump. Okay, so we got the two bolts out of here, and what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take the vacuum line out of the overhead valve cover, and then you're going to want to get just a pair of pliers, something like these, to take off your fuel line clamps here and here, and then we'll go ahead and replace this fuel pump. Okay, so if we have a look, here's our old fuel pump here, here's our new one. The you know, the holes line up, and even the little spouts that come off of it line up, so it is the same. The only thing is the new fuel pump doesn't come with this vacuum line, so we're going to have to remove that, and it comes with this pre-bent 90-degree fuel line, but that won't apply for this exact model, so we're not going to use it. I'll just go ahead and keep that, and we're also not going to use the fuel line clamps that they provide either, because we're just going to reuse the ones from this machine. Alright, so we got the vacuum line onto the new fuel pump, and we got the fuel line hooked up. I'll probably put that clamp a little bit higher. But now you're going to have to prime these. So what you can do is you can put a couple bolts in here, leave this end off, and just connect your line down to your fuel tank, you can hook this vacuum line into your overhead valve there and turn it over a couple times, and that'll get fuel coming out of here. But then, you know, if your engine, you know, if you were running your engine and it was hot, you're going to get fuel spraying out of there, so that's not really that safe. So what you can do is just bring it down lower like that until fuel starts coming out of it, and that just gets some of the fuel inside of the fuel pump, and that should be good enough. You should be able to go ahead and hook up your other fuel line over there to your carburetor, and hook up your vacuum line, bolt this thing on, and it should fire right up. So I'm gonna do that, and I'll bring it back once we got it running. Okay, so I got the fuel pump all hooked up. I left it unbolted, and I left the vacuum line out of it just so that I can get the shroud off, because I did want to check that to make sure that there wasn't a mouse nest starting in there, because of this. I don't know if you guys can see it, but like this little, you know, the little grass there. Sometimes if you see that on that side, you're probably going to see it on the other side as well, which, yeah, you can see. I don't know if that comes up on the camera very well, but you can see a little bit of it. You know, usually that's just dry grass, but if there is a mouse nest, you know, you might see some white little hairs, gray hairs, black hairs sticking out of there. So if you do see that, it's always good to, you know, take off your bolts here, up there, and I think there's a couple in there as well. And we'll go ahead and pull this plastic shroud off just to see. We'll check that, vacuum it out if it needs, and then we'll go ahead and put the shroud back on, get the fuel pump back on, and then we'll get this thing fired up. Okay, so I've got all the 3/8 bolts out of the sides here. You can see that we're gonna have to take, because this shroud is underneath this this like little fairing here that covers the flywheel fan, the fins on the fan, so that you don't, you know, get your fingers caught in there or whatever. So we're gonna go and take those off. I think that's an 8 mil, and we also have to take off those two, and then we should be able to pull off this shroud. Okay, so we got those 4 8 mil bolts out. These two here, they were 1/4 inch, and we should be able to, with a little bit of finessing, as long as that oil dipstick isn't, let me just check that, make sure we're not caught up. Yeah, that just clips in there like that. We should be able to pull that off, and it's a lot cleaner than I thought it was. So as I suspected, it was just a little bit of grass, but you never know. Sometimes, if we can get it to focus, sometimes it is mouse nests, because they will get right in there and they will build. As you can see, it's you know, you could put a fist in there, so it's a quite a bit of room in there, and they'll climb right up under the shroud, you know, through anywhere they can during the winter, and they'll chew on these wires here. This is your high tension lead. This is going from your coil down to your spark plugs, and they'll chew that, and that's 65 bucks. That's another 65 bucks if they chew that one. So you guys want to take your shrouds off and check that, and during fall time, and this will give us a chance to clean up. Like you can see, there's a lot of dust, because our customer here, he says that he only cuts the grass when it's dry. He never cuts it when it's wet, and that's why the deck is in such good shape. There's no rust on the deck, there's no rot. That's because he doesn't cut it after it rains. He waits until it dries out, and then he goes and cuts it. But when you do that, you get this problem here. You get dust buildup, and you know, if there's any linkage and you get stuff like that building up on linkage, then it'll throw your choke out of whack. Sometimes it can throw your you know, it can stick governors, all sorts of stuff like that. So we'll go ahead and get this cleaned up, vacuum up what we can here, and put the shroud back on, hook up the fuel filter, or sorry, the fuel pump, I keep calling it the filter, and we'll get this thing fired up. So I come in here and sprayed a little bit of carb cleaner in here, just to see if I could get some of it cleaned up, but there's quite a bit of dirt It's like a really dry dust, but it's really packed in there. Now I'm not sure if you guys can see in here, it might be a little too dark. There we go, I got the flashlight on, but you can see it's completely packed under there. So I'm gonna have to hit this with the hose, the garden hose. So what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna cover your intake right there, and you're gonna wanna come around and cover your overhead valve opening there. That's for your vacuum line, because if that dirt starts to pack up, these are cooling fins here. This isn't liquid cooled like a motorcycle or a vehicle. It's air cooled. So these fins play a very important role in that. And if you get those clogged up, filled with dirt, your engine, it won't cool itself down. And I'm not sure if you can see in there, but if we can get it to focus. But it is really packed inside of there, guys. So I'm gonna have to go ahead and hit that with the garden hose just to blast it out of there. And then what we'll do is we'll take some emery cloth to the magnets here on the flywheel and just get them cleaned up. We might as well check the gap on the coil armature gap there on both of them, and then once that's all cleaned up, we'll go ahead and throw it back together. Alright, so now that we got that all taped up, I'm gonna go and blast it with the garden hose. Get right in there where all the dirt's packed in under the flywheel, and might as well get under here, if you can see this, by the bottom of the engine there, because it's kind of caked on there too. So I'll hit it with a little bit of degreaser, and we'll get this thing nice and shiny for our customer. So for cleaning, we use some diluted spray nine here. This is an old bottle. It's a multi-purpose cleaner, but you want to dilute it because this stuff's really strong. So basically you just wet it a little bit, get a little spray nine on there, and then it's a good degreaser. It breaks down all the dirt and the grease and stuff. Let it sit for a minute, and then we'll blast it off and make sure she's all clean. Okay, so I said I was gonna check the gap on the the coil armature air gap here. And what you're gonna want to do is get the magnet lined up with the coil just like that, and then stick a feeler gauge in there. And it's important to have the right gap. So to get your spec, you're gonna have to go and get your model number here, right on the overhead valve cover on the right side. That's your machine's number, and you can pull up just on Google or go right to Briggs & Stratton's website, and usually they'll tell you all of the specifications. But as you guys can see already, way cleaner in here. I blasted out tons of dirt, tons of mud, tons of shit that was just plastered inside of there, and that'll help with the engine cooling, and hopefully once we get this all back together, she'll fire right up and run good. That's the plan, at least. Okay guys, so I went online, Briggs & Stratton website, and for the 400,000 series engine, which this is, and I'll just show you again here, it's if we can focus, it's 400,000 407,777. So basically, for this engine, it says 8 to 12 thou armature air gap. Now when I check this side here using 10 thou, she's a little loose. When I check this one with the magnet over here, it's a little tight. Go on this side. Now you always want to spin your engine clockwise, never counterclockwise. You don't want to spin it backwards because it was not designed to do that. You can see we're a little bit tighter here, which is good. And on this side here, we're nice and tight. So realistically, the only one that could need adjusting is this side here, but you know, it's within spec. So we're gonna leave it. And to clean this magnet, you know, you don't really have to. It's gonna rust up anyways, but just to clean them, I like to use a little bit of emery cloth. Emery cloth is basically some really fine sandpaper. We're not gonna, you know, take a lot of material off. We're just gonna get it a little bit better than that, and that should guarantee us a good spark every time. So as you guys can see, we didn't take a lot of material off. We just shined it up a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and get this this shroud, the plastic cover, engine cover back on. Get the air filter hooked up. Get that top safety screen back on. Get the fuel pump back on, and we'll fire this thing up. Okay, so when you're putting your shroud back on, hopefully you guys can see there's a couple little slits there, and they line up with the intake, the air filter intake here, and it's got little fins, and those are like little locating fins. So when you put your shroud on, you're going to want to slide that directly over top. I don't know if I can get you a good image here, but I'm trying. But basically, that acts as like a locating bracket so that you can get everything else lined up. If you don't have that lined up, it'll kind of be wonky, so you're going to want to make sure you do that. Okay, so you're going to want to make sure you go backwards from how you started. So put your 1/4 inch screws in there. Make sure not to tighten them up too tight, because that is going into plastic, the plastic intake. So you know, they're really coarse threads, so if you tighten those too much, you're going to strip them easy. Next ones to do are the 3/8 ones all the way around here, and then we'll get this top safety cage on, bolt on the fuel pump. You know, we'll dry that up in there, and then put the air filter back on and fire it up. Okay, so the air filter, it's we're not going to replace it. It's a little dirty, so what we're going to do is hit it with the air compressor, and you can see it's already starting to make a difference. Now this green part here, that's just the pre-filter. You can it's just a piece of foam. I don't know if you can see that, but you can just tear these right off. Go to your local parts store and get a Briggs & Stratton pre-filter, and just wrap them around the actual air filter. A little tip is, you know, these are obviously cheaper than buying you know, a paper air filter like this piece here. So you wanna change these regularly. But if you're using a compressor to blow out an air filter, you always want to go from the inside out. So you can remove this, the pre-filter, take your compressor, go from the inside and blow out, and then wrap your pre-filter back around it. You can also soak these in a little bit of oil, 10W30, you know, any kind of clean oil, and just so it gets a little sticky, and that'll help all your dry dust, twigs and, you know, leaves and stuff like that to stick to your pre-filter instead of going into your air filter and clogging up your paper fins. Now if you guys need, there's the part number, 792105, and that's for a Briggs & Stratton. I believe it's just so you guys can see here, it's a platinum 22 horsepower Craftsman. This is made by Briggs & Stratton, and again the model number was 407777 type 1582G5, and the code, you don't really have to worry about that. Go ahead and get this popped in there. We'll screw this cover back on, and oh, that's the one thing we didn't clean, so it looks kind of silly, but I'll go ahead and hit that with the hose afterwards. We'll go ahead and get this on, and then the two little bolts for the fuel pump, and this thing hopefully should fire right up, guys. Okay, so we're here checking spark plugs. This is from the left cylinder. Let's see if I can get you guys to focus on here. So this one doesn't look that bad. I'm going to check. The manual says 30 thou. for the spark plug gap, so we're going to go ahead and check that right now. Okay, so we got the spark plug gap tool here. This is supposed to be a 30 thou spark plug, and as you can see, it's starting to go well over 40 now. So we're going to go ahead and check to make sure that this is in fact the right spark plug. It's an auto light. Let me just throw that down there. It's let me see here, auto light 3924. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Google that number, make sure that it is the right spark plug. I think this one takes Champion RC12, I believe, but I'll just double check again to make sure, and then I'll run this number to make sure that this is a replacement plug for the one that it's specified. Okay, so as per the manual, this engine takes a Champion RC12YC plug, and this, after a quick little Google search, this auto light, this thing never fucking focuses, you piece of shit. There we go. Auto light 3924. So this plug directly replaces a Champion RC12YC. The only problem is the manual says it's supposed to be a 30 thou plug gap, and this is starting to go well over 40. So we're going to get these gapped to 30 thou and put them back in, and hopefully this thing fires right up. And you know, a lot of people are going to say, well, you know, why are you doing all this work if it was just a quick little, you know, fuel pump replacement that should have taken a couple minutes? Well, here we like to do a good job. We like to be thorough. And, you know, if we didn't take this shroud off, we never would have seen all of the dirt and the crud that was packed into the cooling fins. And, you know, if we left that, over time, that would have accumulated more and more. And he would have ran into overheating issues, which if you run into overheating issues, then next thing you know, you know, you could warp your valves. You could have all sorts of nasty problems. And as you can see, this machine is in excellent condition. You know, like I said, the guy only cuts his grass during dry conditions, so the deck's not rotted. Hell, it's not even rusted. So, you know, when you got a customer that takes good care of it, you want to take good care of it as well. So I'm trying to get a shot of this, guys. I don't know if the camera's going to focus on that or not, but you can see that right there, the oil's just under the ad. So before we fire this up, I'm trying to get a good shot of it. We're going to go ahead and just add a little bit. You want it in between these two holes. So we're going to go and add maybe half an ounce, maybe an ounce of oil, and that should bring it up right where we need it. Okay, so we added a little bit of GTX Premium Castrol 10W30, and I don't know if you guys are going to be able to catch this or not, but she's just in between. She's right in between. Yeah, you guys can't see that at all, but it is right in between the two little holes there, and that's right where you want it. So we're gonna go ahead and just do a little once over first, make sure everything's good, and then we're gonna go ahead and fire this thing up. Hey guys, so I just wanted to do a quick little end audio piece here. We were quite busy that day, so I never ended up getting a video clip of the YT3500 riding lawnmower running. But basically, once I you know, topped up the oil, and I just had to turn it over for a little while to get that fuel into the fuel pump. Once the fuel got to the fuel pump and basically primed itself, it fired up every time. And just so you guys know, because some of you might have questions as to how we knew that it was going to be a fuel pump issue and not, let's say, carburetor, like a dirty carb or a valve issue. Basically, when it did run, or when it did start, it would run perfectly fine. I drove it up and down the road beforehand, and the customer even drove it to our house. So it was just a matter of that the diaphragm, or you know, inside of the original fuel pump, that was just worn out and just didn't have as much suction as the new one. The customer ended up opting to get the $43 OEM fuel pump that we got from the parts store near our house. You know, we told him that we could have got one for like $20, I think, on Amazon it was at the time, but he opted to go with the OEM brand, And, you know, all said and done, another happy customer. Talk to you guys later.